All right, for those of you who have been watching us, we had this like fancy intro to our thing, and then we would start talking, and we decided we're just going to start talking because when Tabitha, I'm Amy, that's Tabitha, we both write, and we have a website called Authors Buzz, which you're on our YouTube channel watching. We share our tips, and a lot of times for writing or how to get through the process, and a lot of times it's stuff that's going on right now.
Right now, exactly
Yeah.
what we're in the midst of. And we also decided to drop our backgrounds and show you where we really are. I am in wine country, Temecula, actually, Southern California wine country, because I live on my RV. And so we're traveling the country, and my son is getting married. Our son is getting married, having a wedding celebration next weekend. So we're here doing that.
Yeah, so
Pretty view.
we're real, and I am always here. Which is, but not always, actually, because maybe we'll do one together when I'm.
Yes, when you're here. We'll have to sit you across somewhere. And we
yeah,
can Zoom.
we're real people. We decided we just wanted to own that,
Yep,
so you're out
exactly.
there, you're writing however you're writing, and we are, we've been where you are, and we've learned what we've learned, and hopefully it'll help you. So one of the things Tabitha and I were talking about before we started to record, and we realized it was a really good thing to record, is the concept that once you are done with a draft of your novel, that's when you know enough to go back and write a good beginning.
Agreed. So many times I think as writers, we know that the first couple of chapters are what's going to hook an agent or a acquisitions editor, if we're going that route, or B, it's going to hook our readers right away. So we pay all this attention to the first couple of chapters, and often we do it before we even know what the right place to have started was, what kind of pacing we need, how we really want to hook them in. So it might make sense to spend a little less time on that up front, get it all out, because as I like to say, as Terry Pratchett liked to say, the first draft is you telling yourself the story. You get those details out, and it's probably not paced well, and you probably started in the wrong place, or info dumped too much in the beginning, or because you're trying to get it out. So it does make sense to think about going back after you're finished and rewriting your beginning. And I have done it, and Amy is in the process of doing it. So
I am in the process of doing. I have a question for you. Have you ever? How often have you had to scrap your beginning and start someplace else or write something new?
I fully scrapped it. So in my sci-fi trilogy, I fully scrapped the beginning in book 2. Fully scrapped. It was not it just, I did too much recapping in the beginning, and too much there wasn't enough action. And my note from my editor, she actually said, in your first book you started everything with a spaceship crash, like that was how you opened this series. She's like, now we're starting with a recap. She said it nicely, but I know what she meant was, no, like nobody's going to be hooked back in. And so what I realized was I needed to create an action sequence to hook people in, because that is sort of was the feel of these books, right? It was like they were a lot plot heavy and a lot of action, and kind of get people right back into the action, orient them to the what's happening. And then I slowed it back down and gave some of those details of, now where are they now, and what happened, where did Kaylee end up, and where is Derek, and kind of sort of went back and slowed the pacing down a tiny bit after that, and then picked it back up. And it was actually great, because I took all of that jumble of stuff, a lot of character stuff, and a lot of, in this case, recapping, and I pulled it out and I peppered it in when you needed to know as the reader, or when it became like obvious through a scene. The first time Derek, they're a couple, but they're far across the galaxy from one another, and he's off on a mission and she's off doing something else, blah blah blah. The first time they actually communicate with one another, you hear what she's up to and what, but not the first 3, not the first full chapter. So I rewrote that completely. The first 3 chapters started in a different place, started with a different action sequence, and it worked really well. By the 3rd book, I sort of knew I needed to do that. So I had the opening scene was was already the hook scene. And I think maybe you get a little better at that, or maybe it's just because I was working with a series, so I was already so invested in the world and already knew where that story was going. And with my romantic suspense stuff, I agonized. I wrote two beginnings for one of them, because I wasn't sure if the action was actually going to make sense right away, or you would care about it right away if you didn't know the characters. And in that case, I did decide to go back and give like a more, I don't want to say a slower open, but the not action open. And it was on purpose, because in this one you really, to for that one horrible scene to have the impact I wanted, you had to be in love with these characters first, and you had to know they were in love with each other for it to have the impact. Whereas, with my other book, that wasn't the case. You did not need a recap. You did not need all of this laid out first, so anyway.
Right. It depends on genre too,
Yes.
what kind of start your readers expect. When
Right.
we were talking about some feedback that I got for my manuscript, which is young adult science fiction. And okay, so side note, yeah, I cried. I mean,
I
when you
mean, you
read
do.
those pages, you have a moment where you're like,
Oh,
no.
you do,
I'm
you really
really
do, and
uh,
it's okay to, and it doesn't matter where you are. Like, I
yeah.
have that moment. I had the moment, back when I was pitching agents and you get the piles of rejections. I had it when my agent herself was reading a manuscript she was repping and said, I really, this part. And I'm like, I can't do it again. I can't go back, and I can't think about this anymore. And that's when you just maybe step back, take a moment, take a breath, drink a bottle of wine, whatever you got to do. And the you do start to see how you can fix it, though. And with my editor, when I was indie publishing those first three books, and my editor's wonderful. She's a lovely human. And the way she says things is usually quite nice. And I still get the document back with all the red ink and all the red. And I'm like, okay, all you're gonna do right now is take in the comments, not respond at all, and then you're going to give a little space, and then you come back, and it doesn't matter where you are in the process. You getting rejections from acquisitions editors, agents. It's just an industry of rejection. It's like baseball. You know what? How else can you feel successful when you're only, hit the ball 1/3 of the time, right? That's a super, average. So it's a similar thing. It's like, oh, except that this is out of your head that you spent so much time with. But writing the beginning, after, if you didn't get it right, but you're not sure why, or you just have that nagging feeling the whole way through, don't worry about it. Get to the end. You'll figure out how to come back and what the appropriate beginning is. And then it's just kind of exciting, because you just made your book 10 times better.
It is absolutely definitely better
Yeah.
day after my day of
Take a day. It's
wanting to
okay.
crumple in a ball and just like be like, okay, like that's it, I'm never writing again.
I know I suck. I'm an imposter. Why am
It,
I doing this? The whole book is
I
trash.
started, we talked through it and I started to get a really good idea. And then as that idea started gaining momentum, I saw how that was going to give me a vehicle to get rid of a lot of the sprinkling of information I had to do in the first version for world building.
Right.
So it made all of that a lot more show and a lot less tell.
Right.
And now as I'm going back and reworking what comes next after the opening scene, all those little places where I'm like, oh, we either already know that or we really don't need to know that now.
Right.
Uh,
And it tightens everything up.
yeah,
It
yeah.
fixes pacing usually, and it elevates the whole intensity of the story usually. Like, and sometimes you just don't know what that looks like until you've laid it all out. You just don't, because in your case, and I've read your manuscript, that teaser of a piece of information that got kind of sprinkled in throughout created a really good action scene at the beginning that was really like boom, right into it, right? Something's gone wrong, something terrible's just happened. It invests you right away in the story, and then you can back up and slow down a little bit and do a little more character building and then come back to, the impact of this on but you don't know that until you write it. You just don't,
And
oftentimes.
I think that's our point. And I don't know. I know I've talked with you about it personally. I don't know if we've discussed it here. I always feel like they should do that with shows. The pilot almost always kind of stinks.
Right. And you always say, oh, we got to
Having
give it
them,
2 episodes, to get into it, or
yeah.
sometimes 3. Right. But wouldn't it be nice if the first one was like, wow, that was
And
so
they
good?
could do that after they've already done the first 10. I mean, I'm sure it's expensive, but, and I know they need to make the pilot to, what's
Well,
the
you
word?
could just come back to the
Hello.
screenwriters, or the
Yeah.
writers, like how many do they have to write before the first one's being produced? I mean, I know some are writing week to week, but when you're doing the streaming thing,
I really
I'm
think it should
sure you
be
got a
done.
big chunk of it. And, I don't know, maybe I don't know anything about that. So
I'm sure money is involved, but I do also know that we are not the only ones who are in love with the show, but like the first 1, 2, or 3 kind of stink, and then they get the rhythm going. So why not
yeah,
why not when you're planning the whole thing, you're going to be like, we're going to be better at this once we've done a season. So let's plan on write all of these. And then when we're here, let's go back and write a really
a
good
really
first
good
one
opening.
that
Yep.
maybe it replaces like the first 2 or the first 3. Because what they have to do in a pilot, I know from my daughter who was a screenplay writer, went to school for screenplay writing, is you must, for pitching it, and
Have a
you
pilot.
have to introduce all the every character that's going to be significant. You kind of have to introduce. You have to. It's designed to kind of show more than you really need to if you're actually going to be watching the show.
Right. Yeah.
So
It's like a formula
yeah,
to
so
it.
it's like probably like a little bit more boring.
But we have
I,
an opportunity to not do that as long
yeah,
form
we have
writers.
the
We
opportunity
have an
not to.
opportunity not to do that. And to really make our, the beginning. And I remember one time I think I was at Worldcon in somewhere or other. I've been a few times. And
There's been a
one,
few.
I know I love my people are there. My geeky people are there. But I did a thing where I was where you could be the mentor or the mentee if you had a piece of writing that you wanted to bring and have it critiqued. So there were 3 of us that were reading manuscripts, like the first 5,000 words. So they gave them to us like 6 weeks ahead of time, and we got to have like I think 6 manuscripts beginnings or whatever piece that they wanted critiqued. Mostly they were beginnings, and we got to read them and write them, and then just do a circle with those writers and the 3 of us and give comments. And we would start with our comments, but then we would just talk out like, what could that look like? And almost, I don't want to say almost all, but probably half, my recommendation was you didn't start in the right place. I read 3, 5, 7 pages. Right here was where you hooked me. So find a way to go take that and bring it to life. And then you can, and it doesn't always mean backtracking in time. You sometimes don't have to backtrack in time. You start here, but the details that you needed from what you did before, you're finding a way to put them in if they're still important and relevant.
Yeah, well, actually, with Brainstorm, my first novel, I had that epiphany. I was like, oh, I could start right here, and I don't even need to put. I didn't even need to use like the first 10 pages.
Right.
Like,
Right. Oh, and
I
Dreamwalker, my one that's on sub right now,
still,
I rewrote the whole beginning. Yes, rewrote the beginning. I kept the thing that I need to have happen. There was an inciting incident that happened, but it was very diluted with other things that were happening. It took too long, whatever. So it went poof, and that was one of those times where I was like,
yeah,
I don't
and
love
and
to.
like listen to your instinct. So interestingly, before I got this feedback from an agent, I was starting to wonder about my opening pages because I feel like I have a really strong story and I know it's well written and I know I did a good query letter and good synopsis and all that. So I really felt like, like that's, to me, that's the only thing that made sense is when they got to the pages, they weren't hooked right away.
Right.
And so interestingly, I got this, you don't normally get like detailed rejections of why, but basically this agent said that, loved everything, didn't hook me, and gave some specifics of, I would like I would prefer an action scene with world building sprinkled in. So that, that kind
Pretty
of told
clear.
me.
And, and that's an edit that you almost so can't give to yourself. Do you know what I'm saying? Because you're so close to the story, and everything was important to you when you put it on the page, even if you can cut some of it later. It felt very important when you were getting it out, because for whatever reason you needed to know it, right? Or maybe you thought readers did, but they're getting it some other way. So you almost can't know yourself. The more you do it, the more you recognize, oh, I'm just kind of like, I'm taking a cop out way of starting this story, and I'll come back and figure it out. But almost you need that like distance and someone else to come in and say, really what would have hooked me is X, and it's your reader that you need to hook, right? So
Sure. And I, as you're speaking, I realize that I write visually. So the
me too.
scene that I wrote would have a lot more impact if you could see it, but the reader can't.
Right.
So I'm realizing that I thought it was a little more dramatic than it actually was. Because if you could see on this unknown world, this line of people like going up to this weird looking arch and having like some ritual thing going over them and like walking off the stage and like what just happened,
Right.
that would be interesting. But you don't see,
Right.
you can't see that without like, you can only, so that imagery, it might work for an opening for a film or a show because that's how I write, but I've got to remember that I'm writing
Right.
books.
Right.
So
Right. And I'm
it's
a
got
visual, and I write visually too.
yeah.
I write the
Yeah.
scenes appear in my head, but you can do that with a really good action scene too, though. That does happen for me. I'm like
I think what I'm realizing
kind
is
of choreographing it,
because then you're pulling them in instead of counting on them imagining it the same way you are. And of course, that's the job of the writer, is to make them imagine it, but they shouldn't have to work too hard right away, I guess is what I'm
Right,
saying.
right. You got to get them invested, so
Yeah.
what invests someone in your story? And I think that's the thing, that having a little help and a little outside commentary is helpful. What did invest me in this story? Like what would or did, and then focusing on that up front so that you can, keep your readers going. And
And I
then
think it's a drop of tension, like a drop of strong tension. So for
yes,
me, sometimes that's words. Like I went back and after we talked, I went back and I looked at the beginning of the Hunger Games, and um, right in the first paragraph. Now she's just like, Katniss is just with her sister who like, I think hasn't slept well or something. And then she just says, well, of course she hasn't slept well. Today is the day of the reaping.
right.
So
And you're like, the reaping?
it's not strong, like,
No.
visual or action, but you're
But
like
you're like,
ripping,
reaping.
like,
What's the reaping? Right.
and it's a horrible word. So it's like you need to have a hook. I'm realizing that you need to have a hook. It isn't just about the scene. It isn't just about a compelling scene. It's about something that, yeah.
Yes. And
I
it
just
can be
got
an
a text. I just
emotional
got a
hook.
text
It
from
can be an
Ron
emotional
as
hook,
I'm,
an emotional hook, a shocking hook,
yeah.
an action hook. But
Uh,
yeah,
yeah, because here's the thing: no matter, and you talked about it before, no matter you're self-publishing, whether you're working with it, whether you're querying agents or looking for acquisition editors, they have a shit ton of this stuff on their desk,
they do.
and so, and in readers even too, they have
They have
access
it
to
on their
so
Kindle
much.
or books or piles. I mean,
Yeah.
readers too. You gotta
So
hook them.
and especially, and it's it is a little bit of, you've got to think of it as it's a marketing tool for your book, and then you just have to, and you still need to keep good pacing, and you still need to have action, and you still need to write a good book, but that beginning, you really got to consider you're selling it a little bit, like sell
Yeah.
it, like sell
But
it,
it also, by
why they should
doing that,
care, why they should care.
as you're finding, and I found, by doing that, you are actually making it a better book.
Yeah, you are.
So it's not like you're selling out, right? You're,
Oh,
you're not
I
selling out
love
by
that you
doing
said
this.
that.
You're
I love that you
you're
said
you're
that.
actually making it a better book. You come
Yeah.
back and you look at it and you're like, this is way more compelling. This is way more interesting. I
No,
really like it,
I like it better. I'm excited,
right?
you know.
And that's what will happen. And I knew that was what was gonna happen, but it's so hard to say that when you've invested so much time and energy, and then you're like, I don't have anything else to give. Well, you do, but you got to step back, refuel the tank, come back
And it's
into it, and then
and
the
it's
enthusiasm comes
oh,
back because you know it's better.
here's the scoop. That's the job. The
That's the
job
job.
is being beaten down, stay in them for a second,
Yep.
and then like just dust it off. And throw
Diving
it back
back
out.
in. It's
You've got
true.
to
It is
be,
the job of
you've
it. And
gotta,
yeah,
you've got to have that personality. You've got to know that that's what it is, and you will always be doing that. And so
yes,
I think part of us wishes like there's a time that that's behind us, but never true, never true.
it's
Because
never
it's a
true.
symbiotic thing, right? If you're working,
Mhm.
if you want it to be as good as you want it to be. Sure, if you work in isolation and don't take any corrections, it's just not going to be that great.
No,
So it's
no,
worth it.
nobody is that good. Everybody has a good editor.
Ah, yeah. I think
Or
that's a
good
good
beta readers or whatever, however you get
yeah.
from your first draft to the last, everybody has that process.
Summarize for us, and then we'll sign off.
Summarize. All right, in summary, sometimes you don't know how to start your book until you've written the whole thing. You don't know the strongest opening scene until you've already written the whole thing, and you can come back and analyze, did I start in the right place? Did I hook my readers right away with something? And is there just too much up front that I can take out of here and put somewhere else so it's tighter? And then when you do that, it elevates your entire story and you have a better book. So, nutshell. How's
Yes,
that?
and we're gonna. So we are hoping, and we're learning how to do it just like everything else in the world. We're hoping to do this on YouTube Live. So when we get that going, we will let you know, and that means you'll be able to ask questions
Live.
as we're talking, which might be more helpful for
Yes.
everyone. So
Yes. And subscribe if you can. I think you can still subscribe by watching this and clicking whatever subscribe. Then it will let you know when we do another video and
that's
all
the
that stuff.
professional. That's the professional tips of how to
Those
subscribe.
are the pro tips. Yeah.
Thing, there's a little thing down there.
Those little things out there. All right. Well, until next time.
Talk to you soon. I'll see you at the wedding. Or
Yeah.